we knew that we were going to make another music video. And at the time, we'd only released 3. There was Get Jinxed, The Curse of the Sad Mummy, and Warriors. And so when we set out to do the 4th one, we wanted to somehow raise the bar, do something different.
League has always been a game that doesn't have a lot of time for story. You know, we can't just pause the game for like a cutscene or like a really long monologue or dialogue between a couple characters. And so story in and around League needs to be presented in creative ways.
We thought it'd be really interesting to try and tell a longer story. Could we start a story in one medium and go into another one, and then go into a third one maybe, and actually get players to care enough to click through each time to see what happens in the next chapter.
Which in our head sounds awesome. We're just like, oh, this is gonna be so cool. Imagine flipping a comic book, you know, you get to a cliffhanger of some sort, and then you're just like, press play.
I had worked with Tyler a little before, and he came to me and showed me the script, some ideas that they had for what they were going for emotionally with the story, and kind of seeing what we could do musically with it.
The sequence when Varus actually gets made into Varus, like he goes from 3 separate entities to one entity, could be a really cool music video.
That seemed like an obvious point in the story where we could tell the story more abstractly, where we could go into realms of visual that we couldn't necessarily do as effectively in a comic.
We're in a fantasy world. Let's use those fantasy elements. We can do anything. Like, what's the craziest stuff we can do and have it make sense in a story?
I think it was Tyler who just said, he's like, it's a psychedelic trip. He's just like, just think colors and swirls and whirlwinds. And I was like, yeah, that actually makes sense. How do you explain that? You use the creative liberties of a music video.
I knew when we started the project that this was like an emotional tragedy at its heart, but like when you think about the mechanics of it, it could very easily have turned into some sort of like body horror, like they're just getting their flesh ripped apart. So we really looked at like, okay, how can we make this like a more of a proper tragedy? And it started with this Darkin would need to break them down to their essence, right? Like to what was going on inside them, and then piece it back together in his new thing. And it wasn't so much about just like ripping their flesh apart. It was more about like breaking them down piece by piece, physically, emotionally, and mentally. That's where we got to like, you know, the heads cracking open and you can see who these characters really are. Though they're in the middle of this tragic situation, like their connection that they have with each other gives them a unique opportunity to really see, like literally see what's going on inside this person's head that they're so close to in their most tragic and desperate moment.
It was almost like halfway between writing a song and kind of scoring a movie. And trying to find the right balance between that was kind of a really cool challenge.
With music video 4, we didn't have to choose Varus. We realized there were this group of champions who didn't really fit in the modern League of Legends lore. We thought, it might be cool to try and use this as an opportunity to update Varus and bring him into the now.
Varus was a character whose kind of arc went pretty linear. You know, this thing happened, that thing happened, now I will avenge the first thing that happened. Whereas we wanted to try and see if we could add some more nuance to the backstory of Varus, a layer of depth to who he was beforehand, and something more to afterwards.
The thing is, when you look at Varus, like there's one obvious story to tell, right? And that's the bow.
It was when Graham McNeil pitched the idea of him being one of the 5 Darkin that we got really excited.
He realized, he's like, we're not telling a Void story, this is a Darkin story.
What if the Darkin are the weapons, and what if the bow is one of the weapons?
As soon as we started talking about Varus as one of the Darkin, it all sort of clicked.
We have this well, this pit with this demon inside from an ancient race that's looking for a new body. He's trapped inside a bow at the bottom of this well. Fast forward a millennia or so, and you've got him breaking down the bonds of his prison and becoming more powerful and eventually like trying to get out. So these magical elements have kind of bled into each other and they're at war in this well, and then you throw in 2 humans that have their own story going on, and I mean, you see what you get, right?
The guy who jumps in the pit is not the same guy who emerges from it.
In order for this to make sense, it had to be driven by the strongest kind of emotions that we can imagine. A romantic love in this case. Varus is basically created because Val is unwilling to live without Kai.
They'd met across a crowded battlefield, in the midst of slaying some terrible beast, and that had forged a union between them and a shared experience that had then grown into the love that they share as Heartlights.
They're so close that they understand each other in every facet of their lives. Like, that's why they're partners. They understand all the battles, all the trials, and they never want to be separated from each other for even a minute.
Individually, either one of them would probably have been overwhelmed by the Darkin presence, but together they were stronger. Ultimately, that bond, that love between the two of them is what allows them to hold on to themselves in the face of its overwhelming power. Varus has many, many stories that we can tell, and this comic and music video exploration has just opened the doors to a ton more stories.
What happens when all 5 Darkin come together? Will Val and Kai be able to quell the hatred within them?
We want to tell, bigger stories, better stories, bolder stories.
I really just hope that people watch Varus, they read through the entire story, and they feel like he's suddenly a much realer character.